when 67-year-old Linda Morrison was evicted from her apartment with nowhere to go. She found shelter in the most unlikely place, an abandoned school bus rusting away in a junkyard on the edge of town. She thought she'd hit absolute rock bottom. But on her third night, sleeping on those torn vinyl seats, she discovered something welded beneath the driver's seat that would lead her on a journey spanning 3 decades, 5 states, and a mystery that would reunite 12 families torn apart by tragedy. Stay until the end, because what Linda found inside that school bus wasn't just life-changing. It was the answer to questions that had haunted an entire generation. Linda Morrison had been a social worker for 40 years, dedicating her life to helping troubled teens find their way. She never married, never had children of her own. The kids she worked with were her family. But when budget cuts eliminated her position and her modest pension wasn't enough to cover rising rent, everything fell apart. At 67, she received an eviction notice. 30 days to leave the only home she'd known for 15 years. She tried everything. Applied for senior housing. Waitlist was 2 years. Reached out to former colleagues. Everyone was struggling themselves. Her small savings ran out paying for a week in a cheap motel. Then she was out of options. That's when she remembered the junkyard. Old Eddie's salvage on the outskirts of town. She'd driven past it 1,000 times. Eddie had died 3 years ago, and the place sat abandoned, full of rusted cars, broken machinery, and, according to rumors, an old school bus that had been there since the 1990s. Linda arrived at the junkyard at dusk, carrying everything she owned in 2 garbage bags. The fence had a hole just big enough to squeeze through. And there it was, a 1987 school bus, yellow paint faded to almost white, windows intact, tires flat. But it had a door that opened and seats to sleep on. She climbed inside. The bus smelled of rust and old rubber, but it was dry. The seats were torn, but still functional. Linda made a bed from old blankets in the back row, as far from the door as possible. She cried herself to sleep that first night, wondering how her life had come to this. The second night was colder. Linda explored the bus more thoroughly, looking for anything useful. She found old textbooks from 1995 molded under seats, a first aid kit with expired supplies, and a driver's logbook with roots from decades ago. The bus had served Mountain View School District. She remembered that district. It had closed in the late 90s after enrollment dropped. On the third night, Linda was trying to make the driver's seat more comfortable when she noticed something odd. There was a metal plate welded to the floor beneath the seat, about 2 feet square. It looked newer than the rest of the bus, the welds crude but deliberate. Someone had sealed something underneath. Linda had no tools, but the junkyard was full of them. She found a rusty crowbar and spent an hour prying at the welded plate. Finally, it gave way with a screech of metal. Underneath was a compartment, and inside that compartment was a metal box. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. The box was heavy, locked with a combination lock that had long since rusted. Linda smashed it open with a rock. Inside were notebooks. Dozens of spiral notebooks, their pages yellowed but intact. Linda opened the first one and began reading by flashlight. Entry 1, September 1994. My name is James Kowalski. I'm 47 years old. I've been a school bus driver for 22 years, and I've been watching something terrible happen to the children on my route for the past 5 years. I've tried to report it. Nobody believes me. So I'm going to document everything here. If something happens to me, maybe someone will find this and finally do something. Linda's blood ran cold. She kept reading. James Kowalski had driven Route 7 through a rural area outside town. His route included 23 students from low-income families. Over the years, he'd noticed disturbing patterns. Kids showing up with bruises they couldn't explain. Siblings who were terrified to go home. Children who begged him to keep driving, to not drop them off. He'd reported it to school administrators, to social services, to police. Everyone dismissed him. Overactive imagination, they said. Those families are just struggling. Mind your own business. But James hadn't. He'd started documenting everything. Names, dates, observations. He'd talked to the kids, gained their trust, and slowly they'd told him the truth. There was a ring of abuse operating in that rural community, multiple families involved. kids being traded between households, a local sheriff's deputy who made sure no investigations went anywhere, a system that protected predators and silenced victims. If you're shocked by what Linda discovered, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories need to be told, and your support helps us continue bringing them to light. James had documented 12 children he believed were being actively abused. He had their testimonies, written in their own words. He had photographs of injuries they'd allowed him to take. He had dates and locations, everything organized across these notebooks. The last entry was dated March 15th, 1995. I'm going to the state police tomorrow. I have copies of everything. If they won't listen, I'll go to the newspapers. These kids deserve justice. I can't stay silent anymore. If something happens to me, I've hidden the originals under my bus seat. Whoever finds this, please, don't let these children be forgotten. There was no entry after that. Linda's heart pounded. She grabbed another notebook from the box. This one was different. It was a newspaper clipping collection. The first article was dated March 16th, 1995. Local bus driver dies in single vehicle accident. James Kowalski had driven off a mountain road the day after his final entry. His death was ruled an accident. Fell asleep at the wheel, the report said. But Linda didn't believe in coincidences. James had hidden these notebooks because he knew he was in danger, and he'd been right. She spent the entire night reading every notebook. James had been meticulous. Each child had their own section. Names: Tommy Briggs, age 9, Sarah Chen, age 11, Marcus Williams, age 8, 12 children total. Their stories were heartbreaking. Years of abuse, manipulation, threats to keep them silent. And the adults involved. James had names. Deputy Frank Morrison, no relation to Linda. Robert Chen, Sarah's own father. Elizabeth Briggs, Tommy's mother. A network of 6 adults, all protecting each other, all abusing these children. Linda made a decision. James had tried to get justice 30 years ago and died for it. But times had changed. DNA evidence, digital records, better training for investigators. These children would be adults now, in their 40s. Maybe they were still out there, still carrying these scars, still waiting for someone to believe them. At dawn, Linda walked to the public library and used their computer. She started searching for the names James had documented. Tommy Briggs. After an hour of searching social media and public records, she found him, Thomas Briggs, age 43, living in Oregon, working as a counselor for trauma victims. She found an email address and wrote to him. She kept it simple. My name is Linda Morrison. She sent similar emails to 5 other names she could locate. Then she waited. 3 days later, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. This is Thomas Briggs. I got your email. Is this real? Did you really find James's notebooks? Linda's voice shook. Yes, all of them. He documented everything. He believed you, Tommy. He tried to help. Thomas was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, he was crying. We thought nobody cared. After James died, we thought that was it. We were just kids nobody wanted to believe. He cared, Linda said, and he made sure the evidence survived. I think it's time to bring it to light. Over the next week, Linda heard from 6 of the 12 children James had documented. All adults now, all carrying trauma from what they'd endured, but all willing to finally tell their stories with James's documentation to back them up. Linda contacted a lawyer who specialized in historical abuse cases. She explained everything. The notebooks, the survivors willing to testify, the evidence James had compiled. The lawyer was stunned. This is extraordinary. Most cold cases like this have no documentation. But this is a prosecutor's dream. They went to the state attorney general's office. A special task force was assembled. Over the next 6 months, investigators followed every lead in James's notebooks. DNA evidence was collected. Financial records were subpoenaed. The network James had exposed began to unravel. 4 of the original 6 perpetrators were still alive. 3 were arrested and charged. Deputy Frank Morrison had died in 2010, but his role was exposed publicly. The community that had once dismissed James as a troublemaker now had to face what they'd ignored. But more importantly, the survivors got their day in court. Thomas Briggs testified. So did Sarah Chen Williams. Marcus Williams, who'd become a teacher himself, told his story. One by one, the children James had tried to protect stood up and said, "We were telling the truth, and James Kowalski knew it." The trials made national news. 67-year-old homeless woman finds evidence in abandoned bus that solves decades-old abuse ring. Linda became the reluctant face of the story, though she always insisted James was the real hero. The media attention brought unexpected help. A local non-profit that built tiny homes for homeless seniors heard about Linda living in the bus. They offered her a small home, rent-free. A publisher offered her an advance to write about finding the notebooks and connecting the survivors. The advance was enough to give her financial stability for the first time in years. But the most meaningful moment came 6 months after the trials ended. The 12 survivors, the ones Linda had located, and the others who came forward after the news broke, organized a gathering. They invited Linda. They met at a park, 12 adults who'd once been terrified children on James Kowalski's bus route. They shared stories, cried, hugged, supported each other, and they unveiled a memorial bench dedicated to James, with a plaque that read, "James Kowalski, 1947-1995. He saw. He believed. He documented. He never stopped trying to protect us." Thomas Briggs spoke at the dedication. "James couldn't save us when we were kids. But because he documented the truth, because he hid that evidence where someone would eventually find it, he saved us as adults. He gave us validation. He gave us justice. And Linda, you gave us James's final gift." Linda still lives in the tiny home. She volunteers with organizations that support abuse survivors. She speaks at conferences about the importance of believing children and the power of documentation. James's original notebooks are now in the state archives, preserved as evidence and historical record. The abandoned school bus is gone. It was removed from the junkyard and donated to a museum that documents child advocacy history. But before it left, Linda went back one more time. She sat in the driver's seat where James had sat, where he'd hidden his life's most important work. "Thank you," she whispered. "You never stopped trying to protect them, and now, finally, everyone knows." If Linda's story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that one person documenting the truth can change everything. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you found those notebooks? Thank you for watching. And remember that sometimes hitting rock bottom puts you exactly where you need to be to find something that's been waiting to be discovered. Sometimes the worst night of your life leads to justice for others. And sometimes the voices silenced in the past are just waiting for someone brave enough to amplify them.